Hello and welcome to another Tuesday Talk with Ruby Reese. My name is Killian. I'm co-founder at Ruby Reese and I will also be your host. This week we're talking about a super important yet emotionally charged topic, and that being dog welfare in Ireland. It's a complex topic. It's one with many stakeholders. It's one with lots of nuance and detail, and we certainly will not do every detail and nuance justice during this 30 to 40 minute chat. So from the outset, it's important to say this is intended to be an overview. It's intended to be a conversation starter, not a conversation finisher. And yes, this is only scratching the surface. Luckily, I've had an absolute pleasure of speaking with a topic expert, that being my guest, Jenny Spring, who's a volunteer at My Lovely Horse Animal Rescue. And without further ado, I invite you now to listen to the wonderful conversation that I had with Jenny. Jenny, thank you so much for coming on and joining me on the podcast this week. How are you doing?
I'm good, Killian. I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming on. Would you do us the pleasure, first and foremost, of introducing yourself?
Absolutely. So, I'm Jenny. I am a volunteer with My Lovely Horse Animal Rescue. I've been volunteering with them for the last 7 years, roughly. And I'm here today to chat to you about all things rescue, which I'm really looking forward to.
Amazing. Thanks so much for that introduction. And I suppose now that we're talking about My Lovely Horse Rescue, it started with a focus on horses and has since expanded that focus out to dogs and to other animals. Can you tell us a little bit about that history?
Yeah, absolutely. So, My Lovely Horse Rescue, as it was originally called, was founded in 2011 by three amazing women, Martina and Deborah, who are both sisters, and Kathy Davey. And they came together, and My Lovely Horse Rescue was basically born. And since then, it started with one horse who's still with us today, and he's on Kathy's farm, which is actually now My Lovely Pig Rescue. So you're kind of seeing the theme here of how we've expanded. But we've just grown and grown over the last number of years. We have a huge farm in Kildare where we have predominantly horses, and then we expanded in 2018 and we moved to Cork where we also have horses. And then we also have My Lovely Pig Rescue, which is the rescue that Kathy runs in partnership with My Lovely Horse Rescue. And so we've now come under the umbrella of My Lovely Horse Animal Rescue because we literally take in everything. Um, so yeah, that's kind of a little bit of background about the rescue. Currently, we've over 800 animals in our care, between all of the rescue centres and then also through people fostering, and really that's how we do what we do, is through people's goodwill and taking on horses, dogs, cats, and giving them the opportunity to kind of flourish in a home environment. Um, we have 15 employees, amazing employees who just go above and beyond the call of duty. And then we are blessed with an army of volunteers. So we're about 100 strong,
Wow.
and everybody has their own area, has their own skill set, their own little bit to bring. And I suppose what kind of brings us all together is just that passion for animals and the welfare of animals. And so everybody has a role to play. It sounds like we're a huge operation, and we absolutely are. But unfortunately, there's a need for us to get bigger. Um,
Yeah, and I was going to say it's the scope is just huge. I mean, it's not just one species of animal, even or one, let's say, type of animal. It's or one area of the country. It's literally, the scope is huge and growing. It sounds like so. Yeah, it's definitely a very, very big topic. And of course, many of our listeners are very interested in the dog side of things as well. So you also started helping out a lot of dogs. And of course, we all know there was a need for that. I suppose some say over time numbers of dogs being euthanized in dog pounds are drastically decreasing. Is this an accurate representation of the big picture in the dog world, first of all? And do we have a long way left to go on that front?
It's sad to say that I actually think we're probably going backwards in terms of dogs and the welfare of dogs, and there's a number of contributing factors that are kind of feeding into that. And I was just, obviously I knew that I was going to meet with you today, and I
Mm.
wanted to kind of have some facts and figures. And one of the interesting pieces, from the Irish Times, and again, I don't know how accurate these are, but it's ballpark. In 2021, there was 4,165 dogs euthanized in Irish pounds. Now, that doesn't include the figure for vets that are, people are bringing their dogs into, and they're requesting for those dogs to also be euthanized or put to sleep. So that's 4,000 lives in 2021. But if we look at 2022, a year later, the figure reported is 7,352.
Mm.
2021, 2022 were when we were coming kind of out of COVID. Things were bad. They have gotten exponentially worse since then. And as I said, there is contributing factors. We're definitely seeing sort of the tail end of COVID still
Hmm.
having a role to play in that. We're seeing breeders now surrendering dogs to rescues, or indeed just abandoning puppies on the side of the road because there's not as much demand for them, with people returning to the office. The XL bully ban has played a huge contributing factor to the dog crisis that
Mm.
Ireland is currently in. So we've a lot of confusion, a lot of mixed emotions, understandably, from people about bully breeds. And there's a lot of incorrect or misinformation out there. And we're seeing different types of bully breeds that are being dumped, not
Hmm.
necessarily XL breeds, which are only in scope of the ban. Huge problem with the housing crisis. So a lot of landlords not allowing dogs into rented accommodation. We're seeing people being made homeless. And then we have what's always been a persistent issue in Ireland, and that's just cruelty.
Hmm.
um, and people just allowing dogs to indiscriminately breed. And as a result of that, they end up in the pound, they end up being euthanized, and or in some cases, thankfully rescues can get them rehomed. But I suppose the supply of dogs is not, it's not meeting the demand, or the
Hmm.
demand is not meeting kind of the supply. And we're now having to send dogs abroad to other countries, which for me, like anytime we send an MLHAR dog abroad, it always kind of hits, like in your gut, and it's a little bit embarrassing. A lot of mixed emotion. Now they have amazing homes when they get to their final destination, but in a country such as Ireland, like we shouldn't have to do that.
Hmm. And it's really sobering hearing all of these reasons, and I really appreciate your honesty and openness on that. And I think I suppose we could do a podcast episode on any of those topics that you touched. We could easily speak for an hour on any of them, and it's difficult to make generalizations. But do you think that that maybe one step that people should be thinking about at home is, I suppose for me, the easiest solution to any of those problems is just having your dog neutered, at home. The accidental, at least take that burden off. Do you think that would make a difference for the rescues in Ireland?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I think it would make a massive difference. We definitely have encountered, the accidental litters, and look, don't get me wrong, I'm an animal lover. I love a puppy. Like there's
Hmm.
nothing that brings greater joy than a puppy. But unfortunately, there's just not enough homes for those puppies, and neutering is definitely the way to prevent those accidental litters from happening. Um, Obviously, there's a cost associated with neutering. And it can be quite significant, particularly the larger the dog, the more
Hmm.
expensive the cost becomes. And if people factored that in when they're buying or they're, from a rescue, the dog will go neutered naturally. But when they're buying a dog, if they factor that in, if they do their research, some neutering costs can run anywhere up to 500-600 euro for the larger breeds, which is a considerable amount of money. So it will definitely support a reduction in unwanted puppies. It just unfortunately would not run deep enough.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I know that this isn't the only thing, and solving, there's never going to be a simple solution to a very complex problem, right? But it was the easiest solution that just came to my mind, that that people could kind of organize kind of next
Oh,
week or the week
yeah.
after. It's something that's within everybody's reach in a way. And would you say then that it's becoming difficult to find suitable homes for dogs that are also ready for adoption?
It's a mixed bag, and
Hmm.
like we have just found some of the most amazing homes for our dogs, and we get updates and we're hearing about them, and like some of these people I'm like, please adopt me. The dogs just have the most amazing lives. And when that happens, it kind of restores your faith and you're like, yes, another one happily rehomed. But then you also have the challenge of some dogs have been through so much trauma, so
Hmm.
much neglect, or, perhaps they've not been socialized correctly, and all those important milestones in a dog's life have not been met. So they come with behavioral issues. Some are mild, some are huge, and you're trying to find the right person to match the behavioral issues. And everybody has a different kind of tolerance or a different, and confidence as well is a huge thing
Hmm.
when you're taking on a dog with behavioral issues. And thankfully we can find those people, and there's people out there and they're like, I am up for this challenge. And like the majority of rescues thankfully are in a position to support from behind the scenes, like with our experience. Some of us are lucky enough to have trainers that we can put in contact with people. So to answer your question, are the right homes out there? Absolutely. But some dogs do take that little bit longer than others. And that's why, and I can only speak for our rescue when I speak about this, but we offer sort of a foster with the view to adopt
Hmm.
um, scenario. And what that allows is for the person or the family to temporarily foster the dog, make sure that it's a right fit, make sure it's a right fit for the dog, make sure it's a right fit for the people within the home, and just make sure that everybody is set up for success. And once that kind of trial period is completed, and we usually allocate about 2 weeks, but there is flexibility with that, we then kind of look for a decision to be made, because you'll have a general idea, are things going the way that we need them to go, or is it just not the right match? And then the other thing that we offer in terms of rescue is, even if 2, 3 years down the line, your situation changes, and it happens, it
Hmm.
absolutely does, we will always take that dog back, or horse, or pig, or goat, or donkey, whatever animal we're talking about. But they always have a home with us. And that's kind of built into our contract. And that's the commitment that we as a rescue make to that animal that's come into our care, is we promise them that they are safe for forevermore. So if the situation changes, they come back. And I think that's the beauty of rescuing as well. And I know a lot of rescues would offer a similar policy, is you have that fallback safety net. Not something that I want to actively encourage or promote, because a dog is for life, but it is nice to know if something happens, you have that safety net of the rescue always taking the animal back. So yeah, there's
And
options.
it's amazing. Like, I love that level of support as well, because regardless of where you source any animal, you know, when you're taking on a new sentient living being into your lifestyle, into your home, you're going to need some sort of a support network. So and I'm sure a lot of people are, you know, struggle with that at the beginning when they get a puppy, or like you say, like a hamster, a donkey, whatever it is. You know, you're going to need support anyway. So it's great when you've got a rescue behind you and a whole community that might be able to give you a hand or encouragement or whatever it is that you need in the time. So that also sounds like a really big benefit. And I wanted to ask as well about, maybe, how have you seen the perception and the treatment of dogs in Ireland evolving over the years?
So I'm probably not best placed
Hmm.
to answer this with, without kind of a biased view. I see maybe the horrible side
Hmm.
of animal welfare on a day-to-day basis. And from when I first joined kind of 7 years ago, I've seen a massive deterioration in terms of the commitment from people with animals. But I absolutely, I don't want to be all doom and gloom. As I said earlier, there is amazing homes out there that we've some of the most passionate, committed adopters, fosterers, volunteers. But by and large, and it's not just My Lovely Horse Rescue that are saying this, but from the wider rescues out in the island of Ireland, welfare has drastically deteriorated. And there's numerous reasons that are contributing to that. You just have your outright cruelty,
Hmm.
and unfortunately, do I ever see that being eradicated? No, not until there's tougher consequences. But then, as I mentioned earlier, we have all of those other contributing factors, the homelessness, um, the rental issue with landlords, the XL bully ban. Like, there's just so many contributing factors. The media plays a huge role in this as well, because occasionally there can be scaremongering that is happening, and we've definitely seen that with the XL bully ban. Um, and then there's just not enough money in welfare. There's not enough money in the education of people to support, high welfare across Ireland, and to kind of create that awareness, that education that's needed. And I think if there was more funding, if there was more programs within sort of the school curriculum,
Hmm.
we would hopefully, not in the immediate term, but in maybe years to come, we might see a turn.
We'd
But
guarantee a
there's,
better future for our animals, basically. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And
absolutely.
and you mentioned as well, you know, you don't want to be all doom and gloom, but I think we do need to, you know, shed a little bit of light on the situation, because, you know, if we're not talking about it, then we're brushing it under the carpet, and it's you know, it becomes something we can't really tackle. So I totally appreciate the fact that you're kind of, you know, trying to shed an honest view of the situation in Ireland. Talking about legislation, because I don't want to, you know, brush things under the carpet in that sense either. Do you think we need a lot of new legislation or improved legislation? And I'm not just speaking about the breed specific legislation, but also on welfare in general. And I suppose, as part of that question, you know, do do you get the opportunity to collaborate with government bodies to create the legislation?
Yeah. So to answer your question around legislation, I mean, like, we have some fantastic legislation in place, that if it was enforced, it could be a much better place. Park that to one side for a moment. The legislation that we have however, is, in my opinion, and I think that of, my fellow volunteers and colleagues within the rescue world, is very outdated. And we often have people that are ringing us up or, messaging into us, and they're saying, oh, there's a dog in somebody's back garden. It's crying. It's outside all day. And we have to ask questions, and we have to say, okay, well, have they got access to food? Have they got access to water? Have they got access to shelter? And if the answers to all of those questions are yes, then technically there's no law being breached.
Hmm.
Okay. But I suppose where the question comes into play is, what is adequate shelter? So to you, Killian, it could look very different to what I deem adequate shelter. And you're also not, you know, taking into account the type of breed.
Hmm.
So if you have the likes of a Chihuahua, or you have a lurcher who's very thin, very skinny, has a very tight coat, they're going to feel the elements a lot more than, say, a massive big Saint Bernard. And again, I'm not saying that, any dog should be outside, but if that's what legislation is stating, it needs to be far more specific in terms of what is adequate shelter, because it doesn't call that out. So that's kind of where the challenge comes into play, and that's where the loopholes can come into play as well. Um, in an ideal world, I'd love to see every dog indoors. I think every dog should be up on the couch with us on a Saturday night, where you're fighting for a bit of the seat because they have it all. That to me is an ideal world. But yeah, look, our legislation, it is outdated. In saying that, it's also not enforced
Hmm.
enough. Okay, so we have seen cases go through, but there's not enough of them. And then to answer onto the next part of your question about, do we work with government bodies? Do we work with other rescues? Absolutely. Wherever we can get the chance to work with other organizations for the better, we absolutely will. The catch 22 with that is, it's very time consuming. So a lot of rescues will find themselves in a situation where they're saying, okay, do I get the animal out of the situation, or do I have the time to pursue a court case, which
Sure.
can be very time consuming, bearing in mind that the majority of us are volunteers, we have full-time jobs, we have families, we have other commitments outside of the world of rescue. We absolutely want to pursue the legal case. We want to see more prosecutions where they're warranted. We want to be able to make that change. But unfortunately, there's only so many hours in the day. It also comes at a massive expense to a rescue organization. And you have to weigh up the pros and cons for the time that you're spending pursuing that case with a very low probability that you will win. You could potentially save 5 to 10 other lives.
Hmm.
It's a
Yeah.
rock and a hard place.
Yeah. And of course, it's very, very easy for someone to say, but you should be pursuing the case. But then, of course, when you see the reality of the situation, there does have to be a kind of a
Yeah.
prioritization of time,
Yeah.
especially when your resources are so limited. And are there ways that we can work with our local communities to promote more responsible dog ownership as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, like, there's so many things, and kind of, we say that there's 5 things that people can do.
Hmm.
They can adopt. If you can't adopt, you might be able to foster. If you can't foster, you can donate. If you can't donate, you might be able to volunteer. And just to expand on volunteering, because everybody thinks, oh, I need to go down to my local rescue. I need to be cleaning out kennels and I need to be walking dogs. And that's not necessarily it at all. And as I said to you, like, with our 100 strong army of volunteers, everybody has their own skill set. So a lot of them you will never see. Like there's volunteers I've never even met. We volunteers in Dubai, we volunteers in Canada, we volunteers in Scotland. Everybody has something that they can contribute. So it could be fundraising, it could be exactly what you said, like, working with other government bodies to try and improve legislation. It could be working on a social media campaign, it could be hosting events. So there's such a wide array of activities that people can do. They can do from the comfort of their own home, and every little bit really helps. And then the final thing that we ask people to do, if you can't do any of the four that I've just called out, is educate. And educate could be as simple as having a conversation with a family member or a friend. And it could be something, they might say, oh, I want to buy a dog. And you could simply say, oh, actually, I follow My Lovely Horse Rescue, or I follow Husky Ireland, or I follow Dogs Aid. I've actually seen a dog that I really think will be perfect for you. Could you adopt that dog? Every little conversation has us talking, it's creating awareness, and it's just bettering the welfare of the animals within
Mm.
Ireland.
Yeah.
So there's so much that people can do.
Yeah, definitely. And like you say, it can be a really soft little help as well by just giving someone, a push in the right direction. You don't have to force someone, you don't have to frog march them down to the local rescue. You can just say, oh, I saw something on Instagram, check that out. Or, may have you considered,
Absolutely.
there's lighter ways of doing things as well. And I suppose I wanted to look as well a little bit into the future now as well, because we've spoken a little bit about the past and certainly about the present. But what do you think the outlook for the future is? And can we say that there's a little bit of hope anyway for further improvements in the coming months and years?
I'd like to think that there is. I think what gave us in rescue all a little bit of a boost and a little bit of hope is when the XL ban was extended, at least until February. There was a lot of volunteers that were heavily impacted by that. A lot of sleepless nights, a lot of worry about dogs that have been in our care for months, years even.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when we seen kind of the tide turning on that, and just a big shout out to WAG Rescue, who spearheaded that campaign in partnership with a number of other rescues, but they really were at the helm of that. I think when we seen kind of the tide turning on that, it gave us hope,
Mm-hmm.
that hopefully somebody is listening. It was small, and it's
Yeah.
still not the full outcome that we want.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we are seeing a lot more people talking about it. Just another interesting statistic that I read is that 7 in 10 voters don't want greyhound funding to be a thing anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's 7 out of 10. They could have their own reasons, but seven out of 10 is telling us that people don't want the taxpayers' money spent on such a cruel industry. They want that money allocated somewhere else. And that's telling me that the mindset is changing. So it is giving us hope. We've a long, long way to go. Huge. But when you see little things like that and you're seeing statistics like that, coupled with, we've had some amazing school talks over the last year. I've had two amazing little kids who actually found a dog quite recently, took the dog home, pleaded with their mom, could they foster the dog? The dog is still there. She's not going anywhere. They've adopted the dog, but they've been crocheting little bobbins, little placeholders, and trying to raise money for my lovely horse rescue. So when you see things like that, it gives you hope. And I think that's all we can cling on to as we try and fight the good cause.
Absolutely. And Jenny, honestly, to reflect back some of that hope as well. I mean, both Chris and I at Ruby Reese, we spend an awful lot of time speaking with dog owners or guardians, with behaviorists and trainers, with vets, with canine physiotherapists, all sorts of people connected to the dog community, I guess. And like, particularly in the last couple of months, everyone has been saying that there is change happening and that people want to become more educated. They're bringing their dogs more to get help with professionals. They're taking much more of an interest, like the way humans started to Google their symptoms before going to the doctor. They're now doing this, going to the vet and saying, well, I've already considered this, this and this. Here where my questions are. So, I think we're currently going through kind of a phase in the dog community that at least there's quite a bit of enlightenment, a lot of interest, a lot of interest in education. So hopefully we can all kind of pull together and keep chipping away at the whole, really, really broad welfare area. So hopefully we can get there.
Yeah, there's power in numbers, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So Jenny, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of your insights and knowledge with us. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks a million, Jenny. See you soon.
Bye.
And once again, a huge thank you to Jenny for coming on and sharing with us on the podcast this week. If you've enjoyed this episode, we bring out a podcast episode every single Tuesday, so please consider giving us a follow, like, or subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. Equally, you might have the opportunity to give us a 5-star rating, which will be hugely appreciated. If you'd like to find out more about what My Lovely Horse Animal Rescue and what Ruby Reese get up to on a daily basis, you can find our websites, social media handles, and useful links in the show notes. That's all for another Tuesday. Looking forward to seeing you again soon, and thank you so much for listening.